Hello, Moshe the man. Okay, I watched your video. Now, first of all, I couldn't find Waldo. You see, I didn't even know what I would be looking for. You know, who is Waldo? What does he look like? So, finding something that you don't even know what it looks like is, of course, not really a good proposition here. In actual fact, that's a very interesting point, because that applies as much to your God as it does to Waldo. Might want to think about that. You see, the arguments that you've been proposing so far, even if, and I'm not saying I'm doing, but if I were to accept them, at best they would add up to a sort of deistic argument for existence of something outside reality that, by virtue of it being outside reality, you might decide to call God, which is all fair and good, but how would that possibly prove the existence of Allah, or Wotan, or Zeus, or Yahweh, or any other Muppet? Think about that. But let's get back to your actual argument. What I found a little bit disappointing was that you seem to have missed a very important part of the trilogy of videos that I posted on the subject. You saw the one about infinite regression, you saw the one about the bouncing ball, but the one you missed was very important, was the one that sort of dealt with the metaphysical side of things. How nothingness as a concept is logically impossible. And what I did to prove that, and I'm not going to go into details, you can find the video and watch it, to prove that nothingness is impossible was to work from the assumption of nothingness and see how the natural numbers automatically, by logical implication, came out of that, basically by using sets and implications. And you start with an empty set with 0 elements in it, you then create another set with all the sets in it, which contains 1 element, which is the empty set, and so on and so forth, and you create with the numbers 1 as cardinalities of the sets, you create the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and so all natural numbers. So you can never work from the premise that there is absolutely nothing. There are always natural numbers. Now that is the simplest thing that you can construct out of nothing. It is quite conceivable to me that a lot more can be thus logically implied by nothingness, and therefore needs to be logically necessary and has to exist. Now look at current physical theories, and you can talk about how appropriate they are, or how inappropriate they are, or how correct they are, or how they're not even wrong. But they're all of a very deep mathematical nature. And as such, they have all been built from the ground, or not even from the ground, from nothing up as a theoretical construct. All the way up to where they imply the existence of certain types of particles and other material things. That is all logically implied. The only thing, of course, that is open here is why this model and not that model. But people are working on that, and there might be an explanation for that in the long run. So, to me, it is quite conceivable that all of reality could be determined logically by assuming nothing. And that is very powerful indeed. That to me makes a God unnecessary. Just a couple of points that you raised in your video and that I want to just address. You were talking about the input of energy on the bouncing ball. What you seem to have missed there is that that bouncing ball is something in a completely arbitrary or completely artificial mathematical universe that has no bearing on reality. Of course, in reality, you would have to input energy into a ball, but in this example, that didn't matter. It was just a mathematical example of something that is not bound by infinity, and yet contains an infinite number of events. So that was a little bit of a red herring, and I do not like that sort of thing popping up in an argument. You also use a phrase in your talking about the universe where you're talking about it began in time. Now that raised a little red flag to me, because when you're talking about something beginning in time, that conjures up to me a mental framework in which you see time as an absolute. And basically an infinity from minus infinite to plus infinite, and in which you then see that finite object called the universe embedded within that infinite time frame. And then of course you always have this mental construct where there's something before the start of the universe. But if you're looking at current physical theories of what the universe is, and the mathematical way of they see the universe as the totality of time and space. So even though its size, either in terms of times or space, is finite, it still encompasses all there is. Then you just make the assertion that infinite amount of time is impossible. Now, that's all well and good making that statement, but you don't actually substantiate it. So I would like to see what you would use to substantiate that statement. Why would an infinite amount of time be impossible? I see no philosophical reason for that. Then you say existence is dependent on something outside reality. And again, I want to refer to the video I made about the construction of the natural numbers out of nothing. If the universe is of a mathematical nature, then the universe itself is as much metaphysical as it is physical. And therefore, there need not be anything outside the universe. Think about that for a moment. The other thing, of course, is when you talk about the necessity of the existence of something metaphysical, even if I were to accept that, something metaphysical that was external to our material universe, I see no reason for that to then have to equate to a personal God. You see what I mean? It could just be mathematical necessity, mathematically inspired metaphysics, and therefore not dependent on a personal God like Yahweh or Allah. The other argument you made was very, very feeble, to be perfectly honest with you. You're talking about approaching this absolute truth, and this is the argument from greatness that I've heard many times before, where you basically talk about things being greater or more true than others, and then you of course arrive at this position where you say that there has to be a pinnacle of truth, an absoluteness of truth, and then again you decide for some strange reason to call that God. And again, I see no reason to do that. It's just absolute truth. Even if I were to accept the argument you put forward, all that then says is that there is an absolute truth. Why would you want to call that God? Why would you want to assume that that has to therefore be personally interested in the lives of us people and call it Allah? Why do you have to assume that Muhammad was its prophet? Why? None of that is explained by that argument at all. It doesn't prove that there is a God, first of all. It certainly doesn't prove that your God has to be it, and none of the other ones that people have proposed. It really and truly doesn't prove anything. But other than that, I even argue the case about this absolute truth. You know, just like greatness, for example, the argument from greatness. it is based that there's always something greater than another thing until you reach the pinnacle, which is the greatest thing of all. But greatness, what does greatness mean? You know, what are you talking about? Size? Power? Ability to be really small? What? It makes no sense. The same about truth. There is an absolute reality, I firmly believe that, but I see no reason to assign absolute truth to that. And truth is, to some extent, in the eye of the beholder as well. So, no, that argument doesn't wash with me. Good start for the debate, but I don't think you've really started cracking this atheist nut.